Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Nedarim Daf Samach Aleph. We begin 5 lines down from the top of the Amid, where the Gemara continues with another question relating to our previous Mishnah. We went through many different categories. We went through a day, a week, a month, a year, a Shemitah cycle, but we didn't take it one step further, which is a Yovel cycle. And that's how Gemara is going to ask regarding that. Is that considered part of their previous cycle, or is it considered part of the future cycle? Today's Daf. Some of this is discussing today's Daf about the question of Yovel. Do we say that the 50th year of Yovel is also included in the Neder? Then we have the distinctions between what we had from the previous Mishnah of Adar Pesach, Abatal Pesach, or Achihei Pesach, until it's going to be Pesach, one's up until, and one's including Pesach. Then Machlek is regarding the cases in the Mishnah of the main reason regarding Ad Pnei Pesach. Does that mean all the way up until the end of Pesach, till right before the last moments? Or no, a person would not be machaz in l'sveika, and it means up until before Pesach. And the distinction between kosher zman and kavua is somebody has a set time like Pesach, and kosher in zman and kavua there's not a set time like the katzer, which is the harvesting. You don't know exactly when they would be. And the machlekes you read about whether yovel or min shavua, the Gemara is going to define the machlekes of ad yovel in the machlekes of is yovel actually part of the next Shemitah cycle? When you go 7 and 7 and 7, you have cycles of 7. And then you have the 50th year. Is that 50th year independent entity? Then you start a new Shemitah cycle of 7 years? Or is actually that 50th year the first year of the next Shemitah cycle? So we begin the current Daf Samach Aleph, 5 lines down at the top of the Yomim. We had said in the previous Mishnah that Shavua Zeh, this Shemitah cycle, you're forbidden the whole Shemitah cycle, and the Shemitah year is considered part of the previous year. It's until you finish that. That's how the Gemara continues. Says the following question. Let's say it says Yain Shani Toyim Yovel. I'm not going to drink a Yovel. You know, we say a Yovel is a long tzad. Is for this a period of 50 years. What's the halacha? Which the Ran explains. It's not that he said this wording of Yovel, because that wasn't resolved when you say Yoim or Shana or Yovel. We didn't resolve that. It says the Ran, it's just the wording really is he meant like Yovel, meaning when you say Yovel, it's going to be Yovel Echad, and then you wouldn't have the question because we would know exactly it would be a period of 50 years because we said we're machmer because we don't know the halacha. Rather, it means says the Gemara, what's included in this? Is this Shnas Chamishim, the 50th year, Kilifnei Chamishim? Is it like before the 50 years? Like Lacha Chamishim or after the 50 years? Meaning the Ran explains the question really is, it's really where he said Yovel Zeh. This Yovel, that let's say he's a few years away from Yovel. So for that Yovel, I'm not drinking any more wine. So that case just wasn't mentioned in the Mishnah, but the wording of the question of the Gemara wasn't precise. It's not Yovel, but Yovel Zeh. Because the primary question of the Gemara is only if the 50th year is like before, is like from the prior, where it's not part of the cheshbon of becoming Yovel, because you don't make Shemitah up until 57 years, and therefore, when you take a neder middle of Yovel and you say Yovel Zeh, you're going to be forbidden in the Yovel year? Or it's like after the 50 years, because that year of Yovel is actually part of the cheshbon of the following Shemitah cycle. And therefore, when you take a neder middle of Shemitah, that Yovel, the 50th year is not included of the previous Yovel, because it's actually year number 1 of the coming Shemitah cycle. So obviously it wouldn't be part of this Yovel. So that's the question when you say Yovel Zeh, is the Yovel year included or not? So Gemara says Tashmat's finger Raya, because actually the time we learned the Bryce, it's a plukta to B'yud v'Rabbanan. It's actually a machlekes B'yud v'Rabbanan and how to qualify Yovel, and that seems to be the machlekes in this question too. Pasuk says you should sanctify the 50th year, the Yovel year. Now, says the first opinion, you count the 50th year, but you don't count the Yovel as Shnas Chamishim Achas as the 51st year. What does that mean? Meaning, the 50th year is not counted as the first year of the Shemitah cycle, that it should be like the 50th year of the previous Yovel, and that it's year number 1 of the coming Shemitah cycle after the Yovel. We got a number from here. They said that Yovel ain't no Eilim in Yeshavua. The Yovel year is not counted as the first year of the coming Shemitah cycle, rather it's considered as part of the previous Yovel cycle. Whereas he says that no, Yovel Eilim in Yeshavua. The 50th year is considered as year 1 of the coming Shemitah cycle. So you see that it's not part of, when you say Yovel Zeh, it's not going to be part of it. So you see it's machlekes Tanai, which the Bryce just continues. Only read the Sitra B'Yehuda. How can you say that the Yovel year is Shemitah year number 1, but the pasuk says the psukim before these psukim that we just quoted before says Sheishon Tizra Sadecha. For 6 years you should plant your field, which sounds like that you're always going to have, before the prohibition of Shemitah, you're always going to be able to plant your produce for 6 years. But according to you, the Shemitah year after the Yovel, you're only going to have 5 years, because Yovel you're not going to plant. And when it reaches the 6th year, according to you, is going to be Shemitah. So you only have 5 years. So on that, Amalahem, he said to them, yeah, but I have a question back for you. In the Rechem, according to your opinions, you say that the pasuk is talking about all every year. What do you do with this Harei Yoim? It says in the pasuk after that, it says, and don't worry, it's going to be miracles, says Hashem, if you keep these halachas, the grain is going to go l'shalosh Hashem for 3 years. Now, obviously, you cannot explain this by the Shemitah year of the 49th year. Why? Because the seeds that you have from the 48th year has to stay with you for the 48th year, the 49th year, the 50th year, and the 51st year, up until the harvesting season that you were allowed to plant, and then finally harvest at the end of the 51st year. Wait a second. Harekan Arba. You got 4 years that you have to provide for in the Shemitah and Yovel when they come together. How's the pasuk saying for 3 years? Maybe obviously what you're going to have to explain those pasukim. B'shar Shnei Shavua. By the other Shemitah years which are not near a Yovel. Before that, and that's where it's enough for 3 years for the grain to last, because the grain of the 6th year will last over the 6th year, the 7th year, and the 8th year up until you harvest. So says Rabbi Yehuda, Dili Nami. So me also, this pasuk that says for 6 years you're going to plant, that you're asking for me, you only have 5 years. You could explain that pasuk by all other Shemitah years which are not near a Yovel. After that is where we're saying that you're going to have 6 years, but after this Shemitah, you're going to have only 5 years, because Yovel actually will be considered year number 1 of the Shemitah cycle, and therefore again we have this machlekes tanoim if Yovel is considered as part of this cycle or part of the next one, and that's going to answer our question regarding Yovel. Now we have in the Mishnah that we said, Ana Pesach. Now let's say it takes yet. I'm not going to taste wine until Pesach. So Asa B'chulu. So in this, here with the round quotes again the words of the Mishnah, where we say you can be forbidden up until it reaches, because that's what people speak, ad v'lo ad b'chlav. It does not include up until. When he says ad shehei, you can be forbidden until sheyetze, because ad shehei sounds like until it's going to be. That means until Pesach is over. But ad, what we had in Machlekes was ad pnei Pesach, up until before Pesach, the face of Pesach. Remeir says also until you reach, because as the Gemara is going to explain right now, he holds that ad pnei would never mean including Pesach itself, because a person would not put himself in a situation of doubt. You don't know which day of Pesach he's referring to. It means up until before Pesach even starts. Rabbi Yossi said ad sheyetze, because he didn't know. A person would put himself in a situation of doubt. And therefore, it would mean up until the last seconds of Pesach, up until then, you cannot drink any wine. The problem is, the Gemara has a contradiction. Remember, is that to say, did a mayor of the Remeir hold, loy ma'ayel inish, nafshes getintim beis l'sveika? Remeir is the one who's saying, no, you wouldn't put yourself in a situation of doubt. If I said ad panei, must mean ad sheyegia. Because I don't know what that means then. It means the first day of Pesach, second day, third day. What do you mean? Like, where does up until before which part? No, so you're gonna only up until Pesach, right before Pesach. You would not put yourself in a situation of doubt. No, a person would put himself in a situation of doubt, and therefore, mitzad hasafik, you have to say that's up until the last moments of Pesach. Problem is, but Minna that's contradicted from Mishnah Masechtas Kedushin. Mishnah says, Mi sheyeshloi shtei kitei banis. If someone has 2 groups of daughters, mishtei nashim, from 2 women, which the rounds are on Amen Aleph, which is he has an older daughter and a younger daughter from 2 wives. So he has 4 daughters, and each one has an older and a younger daughter. Now, V'aman, he says, Kedashti es biti hagadoil. He says, I married, I got engaged, I betrothed my older daughter. Now, he says, I don't know, Im Gedolah was it the oldest of the oldest, which is from the first wife, the oldest daughter, Im Gedolah or maybe it was the oldest of the younger wife, or Vim Ketana Shabigdailis. Maybe it was the younger of the olders, meaning from the first wife, because she's still the Gedolah in contrast to the second wife's daughters, because she Gedolah like those Shabigdalis. She's still older than the oldest of the younger ones. So he doesn't know which one he meant when he did the Gedolah. So what's the halacha? So we have machlekes. Kul Nasur is the Remeir. According to Remeir, they're all forbidden. Except the youngest of the youngest, which obviously that was not included because she's not a gedolah to anyone. But one thing we see is that Remeir holds a person would put himself in a situation of doubt that any gedolah that's possible to mean, he's saying, yeah, maybe that's the one, and she's going to be usher for that reason. Whereas Rabbi Yisrael says, no, kul matar is all permitted, except for the oldest of the oldest, which that's definitely a gedolah. So we see that Rabbi Yisrael holds you wouldn't put yourself in a situation of doubt. If you said the oldest, you meant the oldest of the oldest. So you see the exact opposite of what we're saying over here. The Meir holds you would put yourself in a situation of doubt. The Meir holds it all not. So the Gemara answers, he says, you're right, you have to switch around, meaning their opinions over here. The right nusach is the way it said in Masechtas Kedushin. The way you say it over here in our Mishnah has to be flipped around and said otherwise. And that's what the Gemara says for Tanya, and this is what we learned in the Brayso. Zakal, there's the rule, Kol Shazman Kavua, whatever has a set date, like Pesach, V'ama Ad Lefnei, you say up until beforehand, Meir says, yeah, up until it's over. See, Meir is the one that's mochas in the Shanav Shalisveki. He says that, yeah, maybe he meant this time or this, and we don't know. It's going to be all of them. He says that should get up until it reaches, and again, therefore we see the way we switch it around. Okay, now look in the next Mishnah, again, continuing this theme about what's included for the time span, for the dating of how long your neder is. Let's say a guy takes a neder, I'm not going to drink wine, ada katzer, up until the harvesting of the grain. Or ada batzer, up until the harvesting of the grapes. Or ada masik, up until the harvesting of the olives. So in Asa El Achigir, so it's only going to be forbidden up until that it reaches that time. In other words, even and as the Ran explains in Amanal, even if he said Achihei, which Achihei we said by Pesach, Achihei Pesach means until Pesach passes. No, here it's not going to mean that. Why? So the Mishnah explains. Zakal, this is the rule. Kol Shazman Kavua, whatever has a set time, which is, in other words, the extension of that thing that you set up until has an extended time, like Pesach. The Torah says exactly a limited amount of time. It's for 7 days. Then the Amar says Ad Shegiah. So then he says up until it's going to reach. So okay, that's only Asad Shegiah, which is up until. Amar Shegiah, you say up until that is going to be. Then Asad Shegiah. Then you can be forbidden up until that is over, because since you know how long that is for, so then you made yourself usher for that period. So you can be usher for the Pesach. But v'chol she'ein zman l'kavua, whatever does not have a set time, for example, the harvesting season doesn't have a set time, where it could continue on and there's no specific time. So then it has a different halacha. Bein lamat sheyehei, whether you say sheyehei, which by Pesach, which is makavu, is a problem for the Pesach, or bein lamat sheyehei, whether you say up until it reaches, and the asel sheyehei only forbidden up until that it reaches, because a person would not make himself forbidden for something that has unlimited time. So even those who would hold you, put us in a situation of that, you wouldn't do it when it's like you have no clue how long this is going to be for, and therefore it's going to be only asr ad she'egia. For example, the Mishnah says, let's say you say ad hakayitz, which kayitz means the time of harvesting the fruits of the fig tree. The reason why it's called kayitz, because they cut it by hand. Or let's say it says ad she'ehei hakayitz, that is going to be the kayitz. So although shehei is a problem by Pesach, let's say we said until Pesach is over, here you don't say that. You're only going to be forbidden until the people start lahachnes b'kalkalis, to start gathering it in baskets. In other words, as the Rush explains, not that they're just like snacking from it, like just pulling off by hand. It's that they're cutting off a lot and they're putting in the baskets, which not more than that, because again, it does not have a set time. So only usher up until that time. Let's say you say Achi Yavar HaKayitz, but let's say you say until the Kayitz passes, or then you can be forbidden Achi Kpilu HaMiktsayis, until they fold up the mats, which actually the Ran explains that means the knives, which are designated to cut the figs, which they make them into these round cakes. Those are called Miktsayis. So when those are folded up, so then you're done. That's because you said Achi Yavar. But if you say anything barring that, then you only mean up until, because you wouldn't hold yourself forbidden for such a long period of time that has no set time. Now, Tanya, within the Brayso, just to clarify what we said, Kalkala Sha'amru, this that they said the basket, that we said until the people stop putting the because you're saying Achiyeh or even even if you say a terminology of that would generally be forbidden, but since it doesn't have a set time, it's only until they start. You said until they start putting in the baskets. So what's the kalkala sh'amr? It's kalkala sh'enim, specifically baskets of the figs, because since they're cut by hand, their harvest is called kayetz, and you said achigia kayetz. So therefore, it's the baskets of the figs. But with kalkala sh'anavim, it does not include when they're putting into the baskets for the grapes, because grapes are not cut by hand; they're cut by knives, and that's called chaticha, not ketzitza. So therefore, since you said ad hakayetz, you meant the figs and you meant not the grapes. So therefore, it's specifically the baskets of the figs that you were referring to. However, Tanya learns it's actually machlekes. I know the payers are cut to them, things that depending on the payers of the kayetz, what's included. Say only that only includes figs. It says no, enough machlatem, the grapes are included in the figs. So the Gemara explains my time and what's the reason Tanakama? Somebody holds to ain't mixed to some other. Yeah, figs you cut by hand. That's called kayetz. Another makes to be other. You don't cut grapes by hand, so that's called chaticha. That's not included in the neder. Grapes also committed done when the stems of the grapes dry up. They're also mixed some biyada. You'll just snap it off by hand, and therefore that would be included in kayetz, and therefore the neder of kayetz would include even that of grapes, and therefore that also relates to the halacha of our mishnah of a kalkala, which is because you said that shigia kayetz would also include, according to that opinion, also the putting into the baskets of the grapes, also not only the figs. Thank you to any time.